It's official, Ukraine now has the green light to strike inside Russia. Not just occupied Ukrainian territory, inside actual Russian territory. For Putin, this changes everything. On May 26th, Germany's new chancellor stood in front of the cameras and said it plainly. There are no longer any range restrictions. The US, UK, France, and Germany are done holding back. That means Russia's air bases, weapons depots, and command centers, once considered untouchable, are now fair game. And the Kremlin, it's panicking. So what weapons can Ukraine now unleash on Russian soil? And how could this escalate the war or finally tip it? Let's break it down. This means that Ukraine can now defend itself, for example, by attacking military positions in Russia, with very few exceptions. It didn't do that until recently. It can now do that. The news may come as a surprise to those who remember that the UK and US allowed Ukraine to use their long-range missiles to strike Russian targets back in November of last year. The former allowed Ukraine to use Storm Shadow, with the latter permitting Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles to attack Russia. The key difference lies in the specific kinds of targets Ukraine was allowed to hit back in November. Yes, it could hit Russian positions with its Western missiles. However, those Russian positions either had to be inside occupied Ukrainian territory or at best in the border regions where Putin was preparing attacks against Ukraine. That meant Ukraine couldn't, for example, use a Storm Shadow to attack a military base deeper inside Russia that provided no immediate threat to Ukraine, but can. And Putin is terrified. We know that much from the Kremlin's response to the news. Rather than attempting to shrug it off, Russia has come out to say that the decision made by Ukraine's Western allies is both dangerous and detrimental to any efforts those allies are attempting to make to help Ukraine and Russia reach a peace agreement. Putin's mouthpiece, Dmitry.
Well, it's like this, folks. Vladimir Putin is fucking crazy. I think he's trying to. This could escalate. He's trying to finish the whole. He's trying to continue the legacy of Stalin. Possibly. I mean, I got a conspiracy theory. What if China is actually funding Russia to keep nudging them to go and take over Europe, go into Ukraine? Because China wants to see, what will happen. Could the Europeans exacerbate all of their resources into trying to defeat Russia? And then China has Russia out the way gone and half of Europe gone. Because it is a chess match. And what is in it for Russia to keep pushing Ukraine out the way and keep going that way? I don't see what's in it for them. They barely could take care of all of their vast land and resources they have. What's in it for Russia right now? I'm really trying to see what's in it for them to keep going, other than trying to build on a legacy. I think at this point things could get real nasty. I love how the European countries, though, talk smack. But they're like, U.S., you go fight first, Talk smack, but U.S., you get in there first, We got your back. They all want to ride the hip of a champion, but they ain't throwing the first blow. But they'll talk, and then they'll die down, But as soon as America is in the ring, they're talking and chirping again, It just depends what America is doing, you know what I mean? If it fits strategically their diplomatic resort, then, American bad because they want to get political points. Now, America, United States, they're on our side. I don't know, Europe used to be real big-time allies of the United States. But it's like, how do you hurt us so many ways, especially on trade and diplomatic fronts? And at the UN, you hurt us so many ways, but yet you're our allies. It's like, it's almost like you're not really our allies. Like, it seems like in this day and age, there's no true allies anymore. You know, it's just like, temporary business deals amongst nations, or amongst dictators, or amongst whoever's in power. Temporarily, you know. There's no such thing as long, true allies. I think all of that BS is watered down. Because at the end of the day, nations going to do what's in their best interest. I mean, look at India as a prime example. Oh yeah, they mess with China. Yeah, they mess with the U.S. You know, they mess with both sides. But the U.S., through trade with China, had always kept peace. We never went to war with China. And because we have trade, we've kept peace. I mean, that's the golden nugget. China and Ukraine need to find out what they can come to agree on and trade. It'll keep the peace. But
outlined Russia's response. If these decisions have indeed been made, Peskov said, they are completely at odds with our aspirations for a political settlement. That's a veiled twofold warning from the Kremlin. Russia appears to be threatening to pull out of peace talks, using Ukraine's new ability to use Western-made long-range missiles as its leverage. Worse yet, Peskov is implying that Russia may be forced to escalate the Ukraine war further as a response. We'll discuss what that may mean later in the video. In truth, the West's decision shouldn't come as a surprise. It comes on the back of Russia launching its largest series of drone strikes against Ukraine yet. Also on May 26th, The Guardian reported that Russia had engaged in 3 consecutive nights of drone strikes against Ukraine, killing at least 6 people in the process. The night of the 26th offered up the worst of it, with Russia sending a record-breaking 355 of its Iran-supplied Shahed drones to Ukraine, along with 9 of its cruise missiles. Ukraine's Air Force spokesperson Yuri Ignat confirmed the attack was the largest drone strike Russia had launched against Ukraine since Putin started his full-scale invasion in February 2022. The response to Russia's escalation was immediate, with US President Donald Trump lambasting Putin for his decision. "Something has happened to him. He's gone absolutely crazy," Trump blared on his Truth Social platform. "I've always said he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it. And maybe that's proving to be right, but if he does, it will lead to the downfall of Russia." While that post may be encouraging to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from the perspective of Ukraine receiving more US support, Trump didn't leave Zelensky out of his response. He claimed that Ukraine's leader is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. "Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it, and it better stop." The Kremlin subtly mocked Trump for his statements. It claimed that Trump's words were the result of an emotional overload, suggesting that Putin is still trying to manipulate Trump to his agenda. France's President Emmanuel Macron took a different approach, noting that he believes Trump now realizes that Putin is playing him and that the anger Trump is expressing on social media translates into action. That appears to be precisely what happened. The US, along with 3 other countries, has lifted restrictions on how Ukraine uses the long-range missiles provided to it by the West. Is that an escalation? Perhaps. But Russia showed on Monday that it's already escalating its aerial strikes, making the decision by the 4 nations as much as a response to Putin's aggression as anything else. After all, Putin is being a hypocrite. He's claiming that Ukraine attacking Russia on its own territory will slow down peace talks out of one side of his mouth, while remaining silent over Russia's constant attacks on Ukraine out of the other side. Coming back to Germany and Merz's comments, the German Chancellor offered a justification for his country's decision. He says that Ukraine can only be placed in a position to properly defend itself if the country's allies finally stop holding it back. "We call it in the jargon long-range fire, which is to say to equip Ukraine with weapons with which it can strike at military goals beyond its borders," Merz said. Germany's chancellor also pointed out that Ukraine will use its missiles far differently from Russia. He says the decisive difference between the military leadership of the aggressor, Russia, and Ukraine, whilst the latter has military goals in its sights, Russia is targeting civilians. Therein lies the real reason why the West is finally lifting its restrictions on Ukraine. Too many Ukrainian civilians are being killed by a Russian leader who pretends that he wants peace. With these missiles, Ukraine can finally start attacking the facilities Russia uses to build and store these weapons that Putin is using to kill the country's people. As for Putin's talk about this escalation slowing the wheels of peace, Merz simply had this to say. "After the last 3 weeks, no one can seriously accuse us of not having exhausted all available diplomatic means. If even an offer to meet at the Vatican does not get Putin's approval, then we must be prepared for this war to last longer than we all wish or can imagine," Merz said. In other words, the West now knows for sure that Putin was simply delaying peace talks so he could continue his assaults against Ukraine. Now Russia's leader is about to find out what that gets him. Ukraine isn't about to raise the white flag. Instead, it's now in a position where it can hit Russia where it really hurts. The question is simple. What weapons does Ukraine have from the West that it can use to strike Russian targets inside Russia itself? The answer, at least from Germany, still isn't clear. Despite all of his outlined Russia's response. If these
something tells me that the egos have left the barn, and this just sounds like some shit is just about to pop off, and I think it's going to involve a lot of United States muscle and military, something we didn't want to be a part of. But the way we're going to do it is we're going to test fire our missiles out of Ukraine into Russia just to see how well they do. No, I don't think Americans want any part of this. But America's flip-flop depending on what political party they think it benefits, you know. Republicans traditionally were against Russia. Then all of a sudden we became not in favor of Ukraine, right? Because of who knows what. And now that Trump is like, screw Russia again, now I guess we're going to be back to saying, hey, let's bomb Russia. Is that it? We really need not to be spending any weapons or any money in this conflict at all. You know, it's the whole threat of we're burdening our responsibilities to Europe. Man, let all of Europe become Russia. If that's the rule of the land, is that one, you have to be able to nourish and take care of the land. But before that, before you can nourish and take care of the land, you must be able to protect the land. You know, it's like that lioness in heat. You're not automatically going to be the one mating with that lioness to have all the cubs. If that big bad boy comes over here and whoops you in a duel, he's the one that's going to mate with the lioness. Right? So it's land is land, but people are not bound to land. People change within land. People come and go in land all the time. If you cannot defend the land, it's technically not your land. Don't matter, you know, a law that's on a road or what's right or wrong, that's all a construct idea. You know, that's not based in nature's law. So yeah, so what? If Russia wants to go take I don't think they could take all of Europe. Come on, guys. Like, they're barely handling Ukraine. They're not going to be, they couldn't even get all of Ukraine if they really tried. Nukes and all, they couldn't even barely get Ukraine, I'm telling you now. So the idea that they gonna get all of Russia and that us United States need to start bombing at them to do what? Only reason we bomb at them is because strategically we can do some weapons deals, and it throw a bone at our partners making weapons, so we can get them making more weapons contracts, and it'll help us test our capabilities, you know, using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia. Maybe that's the reason that we go ahead and say, screw it, let's join the Europeans and just be the proxy, give real capabilities to Ukraine to actually not just defend themselves, but go on offense and attack inside of Russia. Is that what we're doing? Otherwise, who gives a shit if they take Europe? Like, really? If they take Europe and better manage it, and then we become better partners with them? Like, no, we don't really want them to take Europe. But at the end of the day, are we defending them, Europe, because we really are worried about them taking Europe, which I already told you is impossible. They can't even take Ukraine. Or are we gonna come to Europe's defense because we want to throw a bone to the industrial military complex and get some more of those military contracts going? Hey, look, if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. I am your host, Johnny Caruso. You're on the ground with Political Decode.
Raise the white flag. Instead, it's now in a position where it can hit Russia where it really hurts. The question is simple. What weapons does Ukraine have from the West that it can use to strike Russian targets inside Russia itself? The answer, at least from Germany, still isn't clear. Despite all of his exclamations, Merz still wouldn't be drawn on whether Germany would be providing any of its powerful Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Little seems to have changed for Germany in that regard. Its former Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, flat out refused to provide Taurus to Ukraine, believing that doing so would escalate the war. Merz claimed that he would deliver those missiles if he came to office. However, Merz has been a little more cautious with his rhetoric since becoming Germany's Chancellor. He has his reasons, he claims. Merz notes that Putin speaks German fluently, so any messages that Merz delivers publicly need to be carefully considered so they don't give too much away to Russia's leader. In other words, Merz doesn't want Putin and his cronies to figure out what Ukraine is capable of doing simply by watching a TV interview. Reading between the lines, these statements tell us that Germany is likely on the verge of delivering Taurus to Ukraine. It just isn't ready to tell anybody. So if Taurus is coming to Ukraine, what does that missile deliver now that Ukraine has no usage restrictions? A modular air-launched cruise missile, Taurus was conceived in the 1990s and entered service in 2005. Since then, there have been multiple variations of the missile, including the Taurus KEPD-350, which is the original, a shorter-range Taurus KEPD-150, and even versions that have been configured for use by other militaries. It's likely to be the Taurus KEPD-350 that Ukraine will receive from Germany, and that missile is terrifying to Putin. Germany's cruise missile has a sleek and streamlined design that's intended to make it difficult to spot by enemy radars, while also improving the weapon's aerodynamic efficiency. It measures 16.7 feet long and weighs a little over 3,200 pounds, suggesting a substantial payload that's capable of devastating the protected structures Russia uses to guard its missile stockpiles. Taurus comes packed with Germany's Mephisto penetrator warhead, which is a two-stage tandem warhead designed to dig its way into protected structures. The idea is simple. Mephisto's first stage, also known as its pre-charge, creates a breach in a target's defenses, including armor and solid concrete. That breach offers a gap large enough for the second stage, which comprises a high-energy explosive charge, to enter the target itself. Once there, the second stage detonates from the inside of the target, ensuring maximum damage. In practice, this makes Taurus similar to the Javelin missiles Ukraine has used so effectively to take out Russia's tanks. However, Mephisto is far more special than that. Army Recognition says the warhead has both void sensing and layer counting technology built in. What that means is that Mephisto can figure out whether it's reached the appropriate point for a detonation. For instance, let's assume that Ukraine uses a Taurus to strike a 3-story weapons storage facility. The weapons themselves are on the bottom floor, with the top 2 floors being administrative area. With its layer counting tech, Mephisto knows how to break through the top 2 floors of the structure to reach the weapons on the bottom floor before it detonates. That means Putin can't hide Ukraine's most desired targets away. He can bury them, he can hide them in multi-story buildings. None of it will matter, because Mephisto is smart enough to make its way through any barriers Russia attempts to create so it can destroy its target. Of course, this sheer destructive force wouldn't mean much if the Taurus missile wasn't capable of striking targets at long range and at speed. Taurus has both these issues covered. The missile is capable of moving at just shy of the speed of sound, hitting a maximum speed of Mach 0.9. While that's not quite fast enough to completely outpace Russia's air defense systems, it will likely do the job if Ukraine combines its Taurus strikes with decoy drones sent to confuse those defenses. On the range front, Taurus can travel up to 310 miles before touching down on its target. That means that it has one of the longest ranges of any Western-supplied missiles Ukraine has, which naturally opens up more opportunities for attacks. Russia can't even rely on jamming technology to send the Taurus off course. Germany's missile combines GPS and an inertial navigation system, or INS, to find its way during its mid-course trajectory. A terrain-referenced navigation system also allows Taurus to plot a course to its target in which it won't confront air defense systems. Plus, as the missile enters its terminal guidance phase, an infrared seeker activates that ensures it can identify and engage its target while fending off any Russian attempts to jam the missile's GPS. All told, Taurus is a powerful missile that rightly has Putin running scared. But even if Germany doesn't hand that missile over just yet, Russia's military installations aren't safe. The lifting of restrictions by the US, UK, and France means that Russia now also has to deal with attack